Use a warm, empathetic tone in the small, peaceful town of Millbrook, where everyone knew their neighbors and children played safely in the streets. Two special friends were growing up together. Emma Thompson and Jack Wilson lived in houses that stood side by side on Maple Street. Between their homes was a low wooden fence that separated their gardens, but it had never really separated the two friends. Emma and Jack had known each other since they were very small children. Only 5 years old, they had climbed over that little fence so many times that their parents had stopped counting. The fence had become like a bridge between their two worlds, connecting their friendship in a way that seemed meant to be. Emma was a girl who saw beauty everywhere she looked. She loved to paint and draw more than anything else in the world. Every morning, before the sun was fully up, she would sit by her bedroom window with her sketchbook in her lap. From the window, she could see the big old oak tree that grew in the space between their two houses. This tree had thick branches that reached toward both their homes, as if it was trying to bring them even closer together. Emma would draw this tree over and over again, but somehow it looked different each time she drew it. Jack was a boy who heard music in everything round him. The sound of wind through leaves, the rhythm of rain on windows, even the way people walked down the street seemed like music to his ears. His grandfather had left him an old guitar when Jack was just 8 years old. The guitar was not beautiful to look at. The strings were old and needed to be changed often. The wood was scratched and worn from many years of being played. But when Jack held the guitar in his hands and played it, something magical happened. The worn old instrument seemed to come alive, and the most beautiful sounds would flow from it. Every single day, when school was finished, Emma and Jack had a special routine that they both loved. They would meet under the old oak tree in their shared backyard. This tree had become their special place, their own little world where they could share their dreams and talents with each other. Emma would bring her newest drawings and paintings to show Jack. She would explain what she was trying to capture in each picture, and Jack would listen carefully, understanding her artistic vision in a way that no one else could. Then it would be Jack's turn. He would take out his grandfather's guitar and play the new songs he had learned that week. Sometimes he played songs that other people had written, and sometimes he played melodies that came from his own heart and imagination. Emma would sit quietly and listen, watching his fingers move across the strings like they were dancing. When Emma and Jack were 12 years old, sitting under their oak tree on a warm summer evening, they made a promise to each other that would shape their friendship forever. The sun was setting, painting the sky in colors that Emma wished she could capture in her paintings. "We will always help each other follow our dreams," Emma said seriously, reaching out her hand toward Jack. Her fingers were stained with paint from the picture she had been working on that afternoon. But she did not care. "Always," Jack replied without hesitation. He reached out and shook her hand with his own fingers, which had small calluses on the tips from playing guitar so much. This handshake was more than just a gesture between friends. It was a promise that would be tested in ways they could never imagine. The years passed peacefully in Millbrook. Emma continued to paint and draw, getting better and better at capturing the world round her. Jack continued to play his guitar, learning more complex songs and even beginning to write his own music. Their friendship grew stronger with each passing season. When they both turned 17, something happened that would change Jack's life forever. A letter arrived at his house that made his hands shake with excitement. The Royal Music Academy in London, the most respected music school in all of the country, had accepted him as a student. This was the kind of opportunity that most young musicians could only dream about. But Jack's excitement quickly turned to sadness when he realized there was a serious problem. His family did not have enough money to pay for his education at the academy. The cost was more than his parents could afford. Even if they saved every penny they earned, Jack felt his dream slipping away from him before it had even really begun. Emma watched her best friend change during those difficult days. Jack put his grandfather's guitar away in the closet and stopped playing their evening concerts under the oak tree. The music that had always been such an important part of his life seemed to disappear. Emma could see the sadness in his eyes, and knew that Jack was giving up on his dream. Emma could not bear to watch this happen to her best friend, without telling Jack what she was planning. She began working extra hours at the local bakery every weekend. The work was hard and tiring, but Emma did not mind because she had a purpose. She also sold her art supplies, even though they were precious to her, and took on small jobs around town. For 3 long months, she saved every single penny she earned. When Emma finally had enough money, she put it all in an envelope and left it on Jack's doorstep with a simple note that said, "For your dreams. From a friend who believes in you." Jack cried when he found the money, and even though Emma never admitted it was from her, he knew in his heart who had made this gift possible. That autumn, Jack left for London with tears in his eyes and hope in his heart. Use a warm, empathetic tone. 12 long years had passed since Jack left Millbrook for London. During this time, many things had changed, but the friendship between Emma and Jack remained as strong as ever. Jack was doing very well at the Royal Music Academy. His teachers often praised his talent, and he had made new friends who shared his love of music. The shy boy from Millbrook was slowly becoming a confident young musician. Back in Millbrook, Emma had finished her final year of school. She now worked at the small art gallery in the center of town, where she helped visitors understand the paintings and took care of the artwork. The job did not pay very much money, but Emma loved being surrounded by beautiful art every day. In her free time, she continued to paint her own pictures. Her little room at home had become like a studio, with canvases and paint brushes everywhere. Even though they lived in different cities now, Emma and Jack never forgot about each other. Every week, without fail, they wrote long letters to each other. In these letters, they shared everything that was happening in their lives. Jack would tell Emma about his music classes and the new songs he was learning. Emma would tell Jack about the paintings she was working on and the interesting people who visited the gallery. These weekly letters were like a bridge that connected their hearts across the distance between London and Millbrook. One beautiful spring morning, when the flowers were beginning to bloom and the air smelled fresh and clean, Emma was getting ready for work when the postman knocked on her door. Along with the usual mail, there was a thick envelope with her name written in elegant handwriting. The return address made her heart beat faster. It was from the Paris Institute of Fine Arts, one of the most famous art schools in the entire world. Emma had applied to this school many months earlier, but she had almost forgotten about it. She never really believed they would be interested in a girl from a small town like Millbrook. Her hands were shaking as she carefully opened the envelope, afraid to hope for good news. The letter began with words that made Emma feel like she was dreaming. "Dear Miss Thompson, we are pleased to offer you a full scholarship to study painting at our institute." Emma had to read these words 3 times before she could believe them. A full scholarship meant they would pay for everything: her classes, art supplies, even a place to live in Paris. Paris had been Emma's biggest dream since she was a small child. She had spent countless hours looking at pictures of the Louvre Museum, imagining herself walking through its halls and studying the masterpieces painted by the greatest artists in history. She had dreamed of painting by the River Seine, just like the famous artists she had read about in books. Paris represented everything she wanted to become as an artist. But as Emma held the acceptance letter in her hands, her excitement was mixed with worry. There was something about the timing that made her feel uneasy. Though she could not explain exactly what it was, her worries became clear just 3 days later when the telephone rang in her house. It was Jack calling from London, and his voice was filled with more excitement than Emma had heard in years. "Emma, you will never believe what has happened," Jack said, speaking so fast that she could barely understand him. "I have been chosen to perform at the Summer Music Festival in London. This is the biggest opportunity of my entire life." Emma felt happy for her friend. But she also felt a strange heaviness in her chest that she could not explain. Jack continued, talking, his words tumbling over each other in his excitement. "Music producers and talent scouts from all over the country will be there. Some of the most important people in the music industry will be watching. This could be the moment that changes everything for me." Emma wanted to feel nothing but joy for Jack, but something was wrong. She looked down at the letter from Paris that was still in her other hand. "But Emma," Jack's voice became more serious, "I need your help. You know how nervous I get before big performances. You are the only person who always knows exactly what to say to calm me down and help me believe in myself." Emma's heart began to sink as she realized what was coming next. "I also need help designing posters and other materials for my performance," Jack continued. "You have such amazing artistic talent, and I trust you more than anyone else in the world. Will you come to London to help me prepare?" Emma looked at the dates mentioned in both the letter from Paris and in Jack's excited planning. The Summer Music Festival was in exactly 6 weeks. The Paris Institute of Fine Arts wanted her to begin her studies at exactly the same time for the rest of that phone call. Emma tried to sound happy and supportive, but inside she felt like her world was falling apart. When she finally hung up the phone, she sat in her kitchen staring at the acceptance letter, feeling more confused and torn than she had ever felt in her life. In the days that followed, Emma could not eat properly or sleep peacefully. She would walk round the familiar streets of Millbrook, looking at everything she had grown up with, trying to figure out what she should do. Every evening, she would sit alone under the old oak tree where she and Jack had made their childhood promises to each other, remembering their vow to always help each other follow their dreams. But now, for the first time, helping Jack follow his dreams seemed to mean giving up her own. Use a warm, empathetic tone. Emma spent many sleepless nights thinking about her impossible situation. She would lie in her bed, staring at the ceiling, with the acceptance letter from Paris on her bedside table and Jack's excited voice still echoing in her mind. She had never faced such a difficult choice in her entire life. Both opportunities were once-in-a-lifetime chances that would never come again. After days of inner struggle that felt like torture, Emma finally made her decision. She chose to go to Paris. The scholarship was too important to give up, and she convinced herself that Jack was talented enough to succeed without her help. She told herself that he had other friends at the music academy who could support him, and that her presence would not really make such a big difference. But even as Emma made this choice, she knew something was terribly wrong about it. She could not bring herself to tell Jack the truth about why she could not help him. The thought of hearing the disappointment in his voice was too painful to bear. So instead of being honest with her best friend, Emma began to create lies. When Jack called to discuss his performance plans, Emma told him she was feeling very sick and might not be able to travel. When he called again a few days later, she said she was having serious family problems that required all of her attention. Each lie felt like a heavy weight on her heart, but she could not find the courage to tell him about Paris. During their last phone conversation before Jack left for the festival, Emma made a promise that she knew she would break. She told him she would try her best to come to London for his performance, even though she had already bought her airplane ticket to Paris. "Do not worry about me," Jack said in that final call. And Emma could hear both nervousness and excitement in his voice. "I am scared about performing in front of all those important people, but knowing that you believe in me gives me the strength I need to do this." These words made Emma feel sick to her stomach. She wanted to tell him the truth right then, but the words would not come out of her mouth. She had already made her choice, and it was too late to change it now. The day of Jack's big performance was one of the most beautiful days Emma had ever experienced, but also one of the most terrible. She was sitting in a charming little cafe near the famous Eiffel Tower in Paris. The morning sun was shining through the cafe windows, and she could see the tower rising majestically into the clear blue sky. Everything round her was exactly like the pictures she had looked at as a child. Dreaming of this moment, Paris was everything Emma had imagined it would be and more. The art school was incredible, with teachers who had studied the great masters and could teach her techniques she had only read about in books. The other students were talented and passionate about art just like she was, the city itself was. Like a giant museum, with beautiful architecture and art everywhere she looked. But despite all this wonder and beauty round her, Emma could not feel happy. As she sat in that lovely cafe, drinking coffee and sketching the people walking by, all she could think about was Jack. She imagined him getting ready for his performance, probably nervous and wishing she was there to calm him down like she always did before his important moment started at exactly the same time, hundreds of miles away in London. Jack was indeed getting ready for the most important performance of his life. He was backstage at the Summer Music Festival, holding his grandfather's old guitar and trying to control his nerves. The festival was being held in a large concert hall, and Jack could hear the sound of hundreds of people taking their seats. In the audience, Jack kept looking toward the entrance, hoping to see Emma's familiar face appearing in the crowd. Throughout their entire friendship, Emma had always been there for his important moments. When he had his first guitar recital at school, Emma was in the front row cheering for him. When he was nervous about his audition for the Royal Music Academy, Emma had spent hours helping him practice and telling him he could do it. Now, for the biggest moment of his life, Jack expected to see her encouraging smile in the audience. He needed to know that his best friend was there, believing in him and supporting him. But as the time for his performance approached, Emma was nowhere to be seen. When Jack realized that Emma was not coming, something inside him began to break. His confidence, which had never been very strong to begin with, started to crumble like a house made of cards. His hands began to shake, and his heart started beating so fast that he could hear it in his ears. Jack walked onto the stage with trembling legs. The bright lights made it hard for him to see the audience clearly, but he knew that hundreds of people were watching him, including the music producers and talent scouts who could change his future forever. Without Emma's presence to give him strength, his anxiety took control of his entire body. When Jack tried to play his guitar, his fingers trembled so badly that he could barely press the strings properly. The beautiful melodies he had practiced for weeks sounded wrong and uncertain. When he tried to sing, his voice cracked and wavered like a broken radio. The song that had sounded so perfect during his practice sessions became a painful disaster. The audience remained polite and did not boo or leave during his performance. But Jack could feel their disappointment. The music producers he had hoped to impress began looking at their watches and whispering to each other. Some of them left the concert hall before Jack had even finished his song. "Use a warm, Empathetic Tonio and full year had passed since Emma left for Paris and Jack performed at the Summer Music Festival. During that year, Emma had experienced many wonderful things in the beautiful city of Paris. She had learned new painting techniques from some of the most talented teachers in the world. She had visited famous museums and seen masterpieces that she had only dreamed of seeing in person. She had even managed to sell several of her own paintings to people who appreciated her artistic tale. But despite all these achievements, Emma had never felt completely happy in Paris. Every success felt incomplete because she carried the weight of what she had done to Jack. She often found herself thinking about her best friend when she should have been focusing on her studies. Sometimes, while painting the beautiful streets of Paris, she would remember the oak tree back in Millbrook and wonder how Jack was doing. When the school year in Paris came to an end, Emma decided it was time to return home to Millbrook. She packed her belongings with mixed feelings. Part of her was excited to see her family and friends again, and especially to reunite with Jack. She imagined their reunion would be emotional but joyful. She pictured herself telling him about all her adventures in Paris, and him sharing stories about his continued success at the Royal Music Academy. The train ride back to Millbrook seemed longer than usual. Emma looked out the window at the familiar countryside, feeling both nervous and eager. She had written several letters to Jack during her time in Paris, but he had never replied to any of them. This silence worried her, but she told herself that he was probably just very busy with his music studies. When Emma finally arrived back in Millbrook, everything looked exactly the same as when she had left. The same shops lined the main street. The same people walked along the sidewalks, and her family's house looked unchanged. But when she went to visit Jack at his family's home, she discovered that not everything had remained the same. Emma knocked on Jack's door with a smile on her face, expecting to see her childhood friend run out to greet her with excitement. Instead, when the door opened, she saw someone who looked like Jack but seemed completely different. The young man standing in front of her had gained a lot of weight and looked much older than his years. His hair was messy and uncombed, and his clothes looked like he had been wearing them for days. But what shocked Emma most were Jack's eyes. The eyes that used to shine with creativity and dreams now looked dull and lifeless. There was no spark of recognition or joy when he saw her. Instead, he looked at her like she was a stranger who had interrupted his day. "Jack," Emma said softly, trying to hide her shock at how much he had changed. "I have missed you so much. I am so happy to be home." Jack stared at her for a long moment before responding. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold and flat. Nothing like the warm, musical voice she remembered. "Have you really missed me, Emma? Because I needed you a year ago, and you completely disappeared from my life." Emma felt her heart break at the pain she heard in his words. She tried to explain what had happened, speaking quickly and nervously. She told him about the scholarship to Paris, about how impossible the choice had been, about how she had thought about him every day while she was away. But with every word she spoke, Jack's expression became more hurt and more angry. When she mentioned the scholarship to Paris, his face changed completely. "You got a scholarship to Paris?" Jack asked, his voice beginning to break with emotion. "The Paris Institute of Fine Arts offered you everything you ever wanted, and you could not tell me about it. You let me think you just did not care about me anymore." Emma felt tears starting to form in her eyes. "I was afraid," she whispered. "I was afraid that if I told you about Paris, you would try to convince me not to go, and I did not want to have to choose between your needs and my dreams." What Jack said next surprised Emma completely. "Of course I would have told you to go to Paris," he shouted, his voice filled with pain and anger. Paris was your biggest dream since we were children. I would never have asked you to give up something so important. But you could have trusted me enough to tell me the truth. You could have been honest with me instead of lying and making excuses." In that moment, Emma realized that she had made everything much worse by not being honest with Jack. He felt betrayed not just because she had not been there when he needed her, but also because she had lied to him about why. The lies had hurt him even more than her absence. Over the following days, Emma learned from their mutual friends just how badly Jack had been affected by what happened at the music festival. Their friend Tom, who had known both Emma and Jack since childhood, explained to Emma how Jack had changed after his failed performance. After that night in London, Jack came back to Millbrook completely broken. Tom told her sadly. He put his grandfather's guitar away and has never touched it since. He stopped talking about music completely. He even dropped out of the Royal Music Academy and came home to work at the hardware store. Emma was shocked to learn that Jack was no longer pursuing his musical dreams. The Jack she remembered would never have given up on music, no matter what happened. He talks about giving up on everything. Tom continued. He says that if the person who knew him best could abandon him when he needed her most, then maybe he was never worth believing in. These words hit Emma like a physical blow. Use a warm, empathetic tone. After learning how deeply she had hurt Jack, Emma spent many sleepless nights thinking about what she could do to make things right. She understood now that simply saying she was sorry would never be enough. Words alone could not repair the damage she had caused to their friendship and to Jack's confidence in himself. She needed to find a way to show Jack how much their friendship truly meant to her, and more importantly, she needed to help him believe in his musical talents again. Emma had saved some money from selling her paintings while she was studying in Paris. Instead of keeping this money for herself, she decided to use it for something that might help Jack. She went to the community center in Millbrook and rented the large hall where local events were usually held. The hall was not fancy, but it had good lighting and enough space for many people to gather comfortably. For the next several weeks, Emma worked harder than she had ever worked in her life. She was organizing what appeared to be an art exhibition, featuring her own paintings from Paris. But this was not really what the event was about. Every decision Emma made was focused on one goal: creating an opportunity for Jack to rediscover his love of music and show the world how talented he really was. Emma contacted the Royal Music Academy in London and spoke with Jack's former teachers. What she learned broke her heart even more. Before his failed performance at the Summer Music Festival, Jack had been considered one of the most promising students in the entire academy. His teachers had expected great things from him, and they were shocked and disappointed when he suddenly dropped out and returned to Millbrook, using connections she had made through her art studies in Paris. Emma also reached out to several music producers who sometimes visited art events looking for new talent. She invited them to come to Millbrook for her exhibition, though she did not tell them the real reason she wanted them there. When all the preparations were nearly complete, Emma knew she had to take the most difficult step of all. She had to face Jack and ask him to help her, even though she knew he was still very angry with her and might refuse. Emma found Jack at the hardware store where he worked. He was stocking shelves in the back of the store, wearing a grey uniform that seemed to make him look even more tired and sad than before. When he saw Emma approaching, his face immediately became guarded and unfriendly. "I am organizing an art exhibition next Saturday evening," Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady and confident. "I need someone to play background music during the event. I know you do not play guitar anymore, but I was hoping you might consider helping me with this." Jack stopped what he was doing and stared at Emma for what felt like a very long time. She could see him thinking, trying to understand why she was asking this of him. "Why, Emma?" Jack finally asked, his voice full of suspicion and hurt. "Why are you asking me to do this now?" "After everything that has happened between us," Emma took a deep breath and decided to tell him the complete truth. "Because I have spent an entire year in Paris learning that success and achievements mean absolutely nothing if you do not have the people you love to share them with," she said, her voice becoming stronger with each word. "Because I made the worst mistake of my entire life when I chose to follow my own dreams instead of supporting yours. Because I want to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for what I did to you." Jack listened to her words without interrupting, but Emma could see the pain and conflict in his eyes. He had been hurt so deeply that it was hard for him to believe that Emma really meant what she was saying. After a long silence, Jack finally responded. "I will play one song," he said quietly. "Just one song, and then we will be even after that. I do not want you to feel like you owe me anything." On the evening of the art exhibition, people from all round Millbrook came to see Emma's paintings and support the local event. The community hall was filled with friends, neighbors, and even some visitors from nearby towns. Emma had also managed to quietly arrange for several music industry professionals to attend, though she had not told Jack about this. When Jack arrived at the hall, he was carrying his grandfather's old guitar in a worn case. Emma noticed that his hands were shaking slightly, just like they had when they were children, and he was nervous about performing. But this time, instead of leaving him to face his fears alone, Emma stood right beside him and gave him the same encouraging smile she used to give him under their oak tree when they were young. As Jack began to play, something truly magical happened. In that room, the music that flowed from his grandfather's old guitar was more beautiful and moving than anything he had ever played before. It was filled with all the pain and sadness he had experienced over the past year. But it was also filled with hope and the possibility of healing. The melody seemed to tell the story of a friendship that had been broken, but might still be repaired. The entire crowd became completely silent, mesmerized by the beauty of Jack's music. Even the people who had come just to see Emma's paintings found themselves drawn into the emotional power of the song. When Jack finished playing, Emma stood up in front of everyone and spoke from her heart. "The music you just heard was created by Jack Wilson, one of the most talented and gifted people I have ever known in my life," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the quiet hall.